Welcome, everybody, to Undermine, Season 4, Episode 14. 14, Benji, where the special of the day, every day, is Phish. Not fresh, but not expired either. I'm Tom Marshall, and I'll be your tour guide, your Phish tour guide, as we continue to set the controls to key stops along Phish 1.0 history. Yes, we're talking about the 1990s. When I was still a dad with two kids, young kids at home, I had a day job, a mortgage, and was trying to follow a band full time because they were so awesome. You didn't want to miss even one show. Wow, those are the days. We're counting down to the ultimate rewind of fall 97, the tour when Phish destroyed America. When we arrive at that destination, we'll take a close look at every fall 97 show on its anniversary. In the meantime, you can catch new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We're very glad to have you along with us on this ride. And we hope that you play along at home by listening to the actual Phish shows that we're talking about in turn, one by one. We've been doing that over here, and it's been a lot of fun for me anyway, to revisit and in many cases, even just discover these exemplary nights of Phish. Granted, that's a lot of listening, so we've been trying to keep these episodes to about 30 minutes as a companion to complement the show we're talking about and leave you with just enough time to listen to the music itself and still make your boss think that you're on a call and those head bobs you're doing are just you nodding to a client, right? If you can hear me, then you've already discovered that you can catch us on all the normal podcast platforms. But if you want to feast for the eyes, looking at you, Benji, you can also watch us on YouTube, where Phish fashion fans can see for themselves that we don't wear any repeats ever. Plus, sometimes it's just cool to see what our guests look like and to satisfy your pandemic Zoom nostalgia. Anyway, today, let it be shown that I'm wearing official Phish Dry Goods 1.0 merch. This shirt is indeed from the 90s, and it's one of my favorite. It was one of my favorites, but since then it's lived at the bottom of my drawer until we decided to put this show on video. But enough. You know that we're Undermine. You know why we're here, and you know I'm about to announce my episode 14 co-host, Undermine executive producer, and New York Times bestselling author, Benji Eisen. Hi, Benji.
Hi, Tom. I think I'm always excited for our special guests because many of them you and I have been friends with for a long time, or else we know them through the Phish community. And there's a reason that we invite them on here. And it's always a good time. There's always a reason to be excited for them. But today, you're about to introduce one of my homies. He wasn't at the show we're about to talk about, though.
We seem to have this funny pattern of inviting guests on here and then learning that they weren't actually at the show we're talking about.
Right. But we knew that going into it today. It doesn't matter because this is somebody who has publicly expressed his love for this particular show. And in doing so, he has turned on countless fans to its charms. And I mean that. Countless as in, like, we can't count them. I think there's a lyric or something like that comes to mind, but okay, whatever. The show that we're talking about today is November 14th, 1995 from Orlando, Florida. The fact that it's in November of 1995 in itself is significant because right about this time, it was in the middle of what was a long Phish tour, and the band started becoming something greater, like on a nightly basis. You could feel it, you could see it, you could trace it, as we kind of are doing. You know, every night had this feeling that it was a perfect Phish show. And then the next night felt like an even more perfect Phish show. You know, right on through December of 1995, which many 1.0 fans, myself included, consider one of the ultimate months of Phish. I don't know if it's the ultimate, but it definitely deserves a medal. It's up on that podium. So we need to bring on this guest. We need to talk about the show. But first, I know that this is why you really have me here. It's just to tell our listeners, hey, if you've been enjoying this season of Undermine, then please consider subscribing to Osiris Premium on Apple. You'll get ad-free podcasts, you'll get bonus episodes, and more. Okay, Tom, tell us about our guest.
All right. I'm going to let our guest in from the waiting room. But first, I want to say, since this is a Florida show that we're talking about, it's also a good time to say, if you want to help people suffering from Hurricane Ian's effects, you can go to redcross.org. And if you want to help pets and animals displaced by Ian, check out humanesociety.org. But meanwhile, our guest came in from the waiting room. Our guest today is Ari Fink, program director for SiriusXM's Phish Radio. You can hear him on channel 29 literally all the time. He's also interviewed me many times pre-pandemic in the SiriusXM studios. And Ari, I'd like to get back there because every time I go, you either introduce me to someone or we meet an intriguing person like Billy Strings, Jeff Goldblum, who turns out to be an amazing jazz pianist, Will Smith, and funnily enough, Joel Osteen, who's like walking down the hall toward us and literally was radiating some bizarre energy. The list goes on, but I'm ready, Ari, when you are.
That's awesome. Yeah, I also am ready, and hopefully everyone else is too. I don't know if Joel Osteen is ready for it, but that's okay. Now that we're moving past these initial stages of the pandemic, things are starting to rev up again at the SiriusXM studios, but we can make magic from anywhere. So regardless of whether it's at our building, I mean, we certainly would love to have you on. It's always a pleasure. And you as well, Benji.
Thanks. Thank you.
Always love being on.
Thank you. Well, so welcome to Undermine, and we're really happy you could join us today. Benji and I figured out that you would have been a preteen in 1995. So when did this show, 11/14/95 in particular, first land in your orbit? Was it before or after you started seeing Phish live?
It was probably around the same time. My first show was August 8th, 1998. I was 16 at the time, and I just started my tape collection. I'd say it was 11/14/95 was probably in my third or fourth cassette rack. Not necessarily in the first 20 or 30, but the next wave. And I mean, it's a heater from start to finish, and it certainly has a unique energy, to say the least.
Ari, the reason we brought you on to talk about 11/14/95 Orlando, we could have you on basically to talk about I feel like we could probably invite you to talk about any Phish show, and you probably could. But the reason, that we thought would bring you on for this one, I heard a large portion of it just by turning on to Phish Radio. And this seems to be a show that you keep coming back to. Why is that?
There are a lot of reasons, Benji. I mean, first of all, the sonic quality of it is both strong and unique in that it has an airiness to it. There's depth to the recording, to the official recording. So there's like a bit of being in the room when you listen to it, at least to my ears. And then the performance speaks to this band at a really incredible time leading up to New Year's 95 and just playing at the breakneck pace and the improvisation, the way that these guys were speaking to each other on stage was just insane. I mean, the musical conversation was happening at such a breakneck pace, and the responsiveness is unlike anything else in music as far as I'm concerned. And there's also something about like these first tiers of arenas that bands jump to that aren't your Madison Square Gardens or the Forums, the crusty hockey rinks and the college basketball stadiums that Trey and the rest of the guys seem to lean into in a unique way. So there are a lot of reasons, and I'm not alone. There are tons of listeners who sweat this show and who request it all the time, particularly that segment in the second set with Stash at the centerpiece.
Well, there's that stash. I was thinking you were going to mention it, and there's a lot going on in there. It's a large chunk of the second set, but it traverses a lot of ground and even other songs. Could you walk us through it?
I can try. I mean, everyone's perspective is unique, but when I listen to that section of music, that like 38 minutes and 50 seconds, there's so much dangerous potential that's just reverberating through the speakers. And also the dynamics that the band plays with are incredible because there's a really delicate element to their performance as well. And part of like that jump to arenas, it sounds like, was kind of controlling their own levels to a certain extent where they can play really quietly and then burst through. And it has a three-dimensionality to it all the way through that sounds like it's breathing, at least to me, in a really interesting way. I mean, it starts out really quiet. The dynamics are delicate, to say the least. But at that first, like, whoa section, Trey just kind of unleashes a bit of a primal sort of vocal to it that you might find it the third pass or the second pass maybe, but this is the first pass through, and it's like, well, hold on. Like, something is going to happen. It's brewing, and it just it continues to have that three-dimensional quality throughout, where the tension and release are on full display, and it's not just loud, soft, but it's tiers and gradients of that energy that they seem to have masterful control of. I mean, there are so many interesting parts to it. There's like a staccato playing to it, and a lot of Trey digging in spots where he necessarily wasn't previously, that kind of, to my ears, sounds dangerous, because it's like being in the ring with Mike Tyson. You don't know when he's going to throw that haymaker, but you know, like, at a certain point it could come in the first round, it could come 30 seconds. And a lot of times it is throughout this whole passage. And it's not just him. I mean, the band responding to what he's doing instantaneously is insane. I mean, there's a section where Trey basically goes back to that staccato sort of phrasing, and then Page throws like a James Bond riff in there, and then Mike responds with like something that sounds like foam all of a sudden, and you're like, wow. You know, it's insane, but it leads to some really, really interesting interplay between the band and each of the band members. And then Fishman is just kind of like right there matching energy, which I love. And it's not just like loud, soft. I mean, it's moving forward and back in a lot of interesting ways. And when I listen to it, I kind of see this spatial aspect of the playing. And 20 minutes in, you know, they've been through Manteca, they've segued into Manteca, if you could call it that. I mean, you can, of course, like, the crab is in the shoe mouth, but it sounds like it could be in a lot of different places as well, several others at the point, because it gets rowdy, right? And then it could be over 20 minutes in, and Fishman's like, nah. Like, he gets real quiet, right back to it, and he brings the band back to it, and then it rages on for another, 18 minutes, with a little gentle landing spot and Dogface Boy. But it's super exciting. And, you know, there's such a surprising, dangerous sort of element to the improvisation throughout the whole thing.
It does. It Beautiful. Sounds like you're on the edge of your seat on a roller coaster. And, you know, Stash, particularly in this period in the 90s, I think, but even to this day, it's always a reliable jam vehicle, to the point that you don't even think about it. You know, when Stash comes in, if it's a first set Stash, you know it's going to be great. You know, it's like it's often the highlight. You know, when it's in the first set, it's almost always like an automatic highlight. I put it there with like workhorses like Wolfman's Brother or, you know, Bathtub Gin. I can't really think of any stashes that fall flat, but this, as we're saying, it's the ultimate stash. Well, hold on. Is it the ultimate stash? I mean, as program director of Phish Radio, are there any other versions that come close to getting requested as often as this one?
Listen, you don't have to be the program director of Phish Radio or any radio station for that matter to have an opinion on the matter. And there are several that are super strong and that are definitely, you know, contenders on the top shelf. July 2nd, 1997 in Amsterdam comes to mind. I mean, you've got the Island Tour stash, and the one from a live one, while I get it, like, I understand, easy to sort of mention and keep rolling through, that was a gateway drug for me, at least. I mean, that was where it was like, this band has something completely unique going on, and I need to at least try to figure out what that may be from the jump. And, you know, Benji, you're right. There are so many, like, you know, quality versions. It's almost even more impressive when you listen back to the contenders to, like, hear that sort of intricacy that's going on. And something about 94 and 95 for this song just feels right. And it has like a unique sort of home, at least it seems, for the band. It's consistent, as you mentioned, but it also has unlimited potential.
And I think that they knew that they were tapping into that potential every time they launched into it. I suppose that this is as good as any time to yank on our tunics. Daniel R. We'll be right back after our commercial break.
Have you ever wondered what it would feel like if your investments reflected what matters most to you? At Green Future Wealth Management, the advisors specialize in helping clients manifest their values in their financial lives. Green Future Wealth Management was founded by certified financial planner practitioner and longtime fan Nick Cantrell, named by Forbes as one of the top next-gen wealth advisors in the country. Whether you are just getting started or have complex investing and financial planning needs, visit them on the web at greenfuturewealth.com. You can sign up for the email list or take the Investing Values quiz. When you feel ready, schedule a free virtual consultation. In appreciation for the amazing Phish community and the incredible work being done by fans across the country, Green Future Wealth Management will be donating 10% of asset management proceeds from new Osiris listener clients to Fans for Racial Equity. Just be sure to mention Osiris when booking your appointment. Create your green future. Securities offered through Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., member FINRA/SIPC. Advisory services offered through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc. Cambridge and Green Future Wealth are not affiliated.
We're back. The cliffhanger was Stash. And we're talking about the 11-14-95 stash, the ultimate stash from Orlando, Florida, with our guest, Ari Fink. But actually, all this talk about stash, and in the break, I started thinking of another question. Ari, as someone who literally sorts through the requests of listeners in Phish's audience, you have a unique finger on the pulse of Phish's changes throughout the years. And one thing several listeners have mentioned to me, listening to this season of Undermine, is that the very early 90s Phish shows, we were often talking about Mike's song as the key song of a show. And then recently, now that we're in the mid 90s, we're often focused on Tweezer. And incorporating all of Phish's shows into your answer, would you say that there are other songs, like perhaps Stash, that eventually join Mike's song and Tweezer in the Phish Hall of Fame in terms of being the foundations for experimentation and craziness? Or will those two always stand alone?
Well, with a catalog like theirs and a career as lengthy and diverse as theirs, I don't think they're going to stand alone. And of course, it's incredibly subjective, but to my ears, there are a lot of songs that can be talked about in the same vein. David Bowie, You Enjoy Myself. There are Stash, as we've kind of delved into here.
Split Open, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this era in particular, the 94 melts are insane. And they're, if you want to sort of get a gauge on where the band is improvisationally, spiritually, listening to what they're saying to each other in the context of all of those titles, I think will tell you something. I'm not quite sure what, perhaps, but it's going to tell you something. I mean, Mike's definitely held that down in the early 90s, and it led to a lot of creativity. And of course, Tweezer, not only in the mid 90s, but up to this point in time today, has played that role. But yeah, there are definitely others, and I'm sure there are others that I haven't mentioned as well.
Down with Disease, especially Down with Diseases, where they really have taken that song and turned it into a jam vehicle. Let's go back though to talking about Orlando. There's, when you talk about Orlando, it's synonymous with that stash, the Orlando stash. But there's more to this show than just that stash. One of the reasons this show is so monumental. What else do you like here, Ari?
Okay, so the foam in the first set is strong, and it's got an easy breezy quality to it. It's not, nobody's trying too hard, and you can hear the volume on stage almost. You can hear the level of dynamics that the band is playing with. It's remarkable in its execution in spots. I mean, listen, everywhere throughout whatever you're listening to, there's going to be a here or a there or a note that may not be as it was written, but what happens afterwards? is the question, right? And where does it lead the band? And so like even in Divided Sky, which I was listening to earlier, like, yeah, there's a minute where it's whoop, and then what happens? The last 90 seconds of Divided Sky is like a torrential downpour. I mean, it's absolutely unbridled. It's insane. Which is why, by the way, as an aside, I don't root for flubs, but I'm not mad at them. Okay? I am not mad at them because what happens next? And you can see it and you can hear it. And it is, I know I'm not alone in going, oh, wait, it's about to get wild because, oh, here we go. Like, it's amazing. It really, it would be interesting to trace like what flubs have led to in the best possible ways. I digress. Getting back to the first set, I mean, the Esther is also really strong. What did I skip? Oh, Billy Breathes is interesting and a little bit extended and has like that sensitive quality to it, but also has some teeth, I would say. And the Julius as well was really strong. I'm not much of a bluegrass guy. I appreciate it. I don't want to say that I'm not much of it, but I'm glad that they capped the set with Cavern and not Blue and Lonesome, just to pick the energy back up. But that's just me splitting hairs. I mean, that's me being me like that. I'm sure there's a ton of people who would have like gone to set break really pleased at hearing I'm Blue, I'm Lonesome and calling it a day. But those are just some of my first set highlights. And then, there's a massive You Enjoy Myself in set 2 that goes off. I always love hearing the wedge as well. That shows up in the encore. And I mean, I just think this show represents and embodies a lot of what this band had to offer at this point and to this day across the board. And by the way, I'm not mad at I'm Blue, I'm Lonesome at all. I'm just saying.
I don't have a problem with it. I think that in the You Enjoy Myself, one of the things that often gets lost to history, there's an Immigrant Jam song in there. There's an Immigrant song jam in there that's just amazing.
Totally. And, it speaks to the band's ability to turn on a dime, or a penny in this case, super quick. It's like instantaneous, and it's an amazing conversation that they're having in very fast real time. And that's the thing that I love about this show, listening back, is the responsiveness across the board of each band member.
Ari, are you kind of given the keys to the Phish car? Like, for example, this sound check for this night allegedly had a slow, poor heart. And as program director for Phish radio, if you wanted to play that on the radio, do you have keys to that vault?
I do not have the keys to the Phish vault in my hand. They are not hanging on my key ring upstairs. In the case of sound checks and stuff like that, we certainly can have a conversation about it if it's applicable to a certain moment in time or particularly noteworthy for one reason or another. There is a ton of officially released stuff, thankfully, that we can draw from and that the band has carefully culled that, we're fortunate to be able to play. So it's really a case by case basis on anything beyond that.
I see.
Wait a second, Tom, wouldn't you have access to that?
You got the keys, Tom?
To that vault. I have keys too. The only keys I have is a mini vault of trays in my demos, hundreds of them actually, in fact. But once Phish is involved, that goes to a different, much more secure vault in Mar-a-Lago.
Mar-a-Lago, Indonesia.
Anyway, while we're talking about this show, obviously Stash is going to be the centerpiece of the conversation. And, Tom, you wrote the lyrics to Stash, but if I remember correctly, it didn't really all come from the same set of lyrics. Can you explain that?
Oh, boy. Honestly, this was one of the time periods where Trey and I would write separately. So he had this music probably, and whether or not he overlaid, because some of my stuff I was writing would be in the same meter, no matter what it was. So I can imagine, and if you look at the song, it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to all have come from the same place, because it's so many different, it's a word collage, so to speak. So I have a feeling that Trey did probably flip through, as many as 5 different things that I might have sent him to create, the final lyrics to this song.
And what's the process of the back and forth, if there is, Benji? I hope you don't mind me jumping in because I'm super curious here. In terms of that editing, like, is Trey just pulling stuff and then it goes into the song? Does he send it to you? Is there a conversation? I know every time it's different, but for this one in particular.
Well, okay, I'm glad you said every time it's different because we've written songs in every single way you can. But something like this, I would just I would hear this song at a Phish show and be like, "Oh my God, that's one of mine." Oh, almost. It was never really that outrageous. But like Squirming Coil, I didn't hear until it was on in Trey's car on the demo cassette for Lawn Boy. But this one, I think he probably played me, and I was like, "Oh, cool, excellent." There's another one. But like something like Life Boy, I remember, he had the original poem that I wrote. And then he called me and played me a first version of it. And he said, "I really need help with this line." And then I would come up with something and then call him back. And then he would hang up and change it and then say, "I wonder if we can, fix it a little bit more." When we finally hit that middle section, stranded on a slender string, a minute seems to last a lifetime, that sort of B section, it was the thing that we had been kind of working around and never quite getting there. But once we got there, we both basically, it was like we were laugh crying because we knew that we had, and that was something that was probably 20 phone calls, 10 phone calls each direction to write that song. So yes, it works every single possible way.
And with Stash, I'm sorry, Benj. I got to ask him one more question. I'm so sorry to interrupt. We're talking to Tom Marshall and Benji Eisen here. Come on. So do you have a specific recollection of any of these lyrics in particular for Stash while we're on the subject? I mean, what was your frame of mind like? What was the context? Where were you?
No, probably I was writing, not just probably, definitely I was writing a whole lot of playful stuff back and forth, sometimes to my friend Scott. Sometimes I would just write a whole bunch of stuff and send it to Trey, like actually by the mail. Here, Trey, are 50 sheets of paper, irreplaceable because there were no copies. Fortunately, they landed with him, some of them, and became Phish songs. But he's like a shredder. He immediately loses things the second that you give them to him. So if they don't turn into a song and Phish doesn't record it, those are gone forever. So I'll never see some of that stuff. But I think it was just sort of a playful period of writing craziness.
Wild.
Okay.
Go on.
I was just going to say, going back to Orlando, this is such a great show, and it was finally officially released on Live Phish. And you said, Ari, earlier that this was one of your first Phish tapes, but where now do you put this show on your Phish bracket?
Man, that's a hard question. I mean, and Benji knows this a little bit because we kind of have these kinds of conversations, I would say quarterly. It looks different every time. I don't have a bracket. It depends on what I'm listening to and my state of mind. If I've had a good day, a peaceful day, like a high energy day. It's certainly, I would say, in the top 50 most listened to shows consistently. It's probably in the top 20 most listened to shows, but beyond that, like jumping into the top 5 really just depends on the season and the moment and who I'm around and what people are talking to me about and what people are requesting on Phish Radio and on and on. But it's definitely in bucket number 1, let's say.
Awesome.
Ari, this just isn't fair because there are a million questions that I want to ask you, not just about Phish, but about life and the universe, everything. But I am afraid that even though we're Undermine, we're over time.
Yeah.
Tom, you want to take us home, Tom?
Well, thank you so much to our special guest today. And like Benji said, we could talk to this guy forever because I really want to know, and this is a whole separate half hour, how you guys program the whole day. Like, who decides? How do you decide to do Errant Path now? And what goes into that? And when does Phish record? I have so many questions about Phish Radio, but we're going to save that for the future.
I'll have to have it back.
Yep. Thanks, Ari. We're going to have you back. And as always, thank you also to Benji Eisen, my co-host. And we have executive producers RJB and Matt Dwyer working behind the scenes and sometimes in front of the scenes. And thank you to everyone out there in podcast land for joining us. Feel free to reach out to any of us on Twitter with any complaints and include Ari in that, actually.
Yeah. People are good at that.
Sorry, Ari.
No, it's cool. It's cool. I want to hear the feedback.
All right. But if you like us, consider giving us a review and subscribe wherever you listen or watch. We'll see you in a few days. And until then, here's the hint. Listen to Phish's show from December 1, 1995. And where was that, Benji?
Hershey, PA.
Nice.
Chocolate.
Nice.
A good way to end. Thank you so much, Ari.
Thanks to you guys. It was a blast.
Osiris.